There is a particular moment that repeats across many relationships, and it rarely looks like what people expect sabotage to look like. No explosive fight, no obvious betrayal, just a quiet internal recoil that shows up exactly when things start going well. A partner becomes more attentive, more consistent, more clearly invested, and something in you responds not with relief, but with the urge to create distance. The easy explanation is fear of commitment, but that explanation rarely survives close inspection, because the same person who pulls away from a good relationship often has no trouble committing to a job, a lease, a long-term project. The aversion is not to commitment in general. It is to something much more specific. The particular vulnerability of being fully seen and needed by one person who could, in theory, leave. John Bowlby's research into early attachment offers the clearest account of where this pattern begins. He observed that children develop internal working models of relationships based on how consistently their early caregivers responded to their needs. A child whose bids for closeness were regularly ignored, dismissed, or met with subtle irritation learns something efficient and lasting. Needing someone is a liability. The safest strategy is not avoiding relationships entirely, but staying just independent enough that no one's absence could ever be devastating. Karen Horney named this orientation directly. She described a personality strategy she called moving away from people, managing anxiety not by seeking reassurance, but by maintaining enough emotional distance that closeness never has the chance to become a threat. This is not coldness in the way it often gets mistaken for. It is a precise, well-practiced calibration learned early that keeps the door open just enough to have a relationship and closed just enough to never fully depend on one. Here is the mechanism that makes this pattern so hard to catch in the moment. It does not feel like fear, it feels like clarity. The sudden focus on a partner's minor flaws, the impulse to pick a fight over something trivial right after an unusually close, vulnerable evening. The urge to fill a newly available weekend with plans that conveniently exclude the person who just got closer. None of this registers internally as self-protection. It registers as simply noticing something true at exactly the moment true closeness became possible. Donald Winnicott's work on early development adds a crucial piece here. He wrote about the necessity of a reliable holding environment in infancy. A consistent presence, stable enough that a child could develop the capacity to be alone without being abandoned, and to be close without being consumed. When that reliability is missing, adults often develop what looks from a distance like independence, but functions more like a nervous system that never learned closeness could be safe to sustain past a certain point. The withdrawal is not a decision, it is a reflex, fired by proximity itself. Bessel van der Kolk's research into the body's role in relational trauma explains why this reflex is so difficult to override through willpower alone. The body does not distinguish between emotional vulnerability and physical danger. When closeness activates an old pre-verbal alarm, this much need could hurt you again. The nervous system responds the way it would to any threat, contract, create distance, regain control. Understanding this intellectually rarely stops the reflex from firing. The alarm was installed before language, and it rarely responds to reasoning delivered afterward. The cost of this pattern accumulates in a specific, painful way. It is not that these relationships end in dramatic failure. It is that they tend to end at almost exactly the moment they might have deepened into something durable. Right at the threshold where real intimacy was becoming available, which means the pattern never gets the chance to be tested against a partner who simply stays. Each relationship ends with seemingly reasonable justifications, and the actual mechanism running quietly underneath every one of them never gets identified as the common thread. There is a particular disorienting moment that eventually surfaces for many people caught in this pattern, often while looking back at several relationships that all ended at a strikingly similar point, for reasons that, examined together, sound suspiciously alike. A specific, uncomfortable question can follow. What if the exits were not caused by who these partners were, but by how close they were allowed to get before the pattern activated on schedule? Marcus Aurelius wrote that we are disturbed not by events themselves, but by the view we take of them. For someone shaped by this pattern, the view has been fixed for a long time. Closeness is a risk to be managed, not a resource to be trusted. Jung would add that this kind of unconscious material does not soften on its own. It has to be brought into conscious awareness, examined directly before its grip can loosen even slightly. None of this means the withdrawal was ever really about the partner, and it does not mean it was a character flaw either. It was a strategy built early for a nervous system that once had good reason to believe it. The strategy simply never received the update that some people in fact stay. This channel exists to sit with exactly these kinds of quiet, unspoken psychological patterns, the ones that shape a life from underneath, without ever announcing themselves by name. If that is the kind of exploration you are drawn to, consider staying. There is no simple fix offered here, no technique that dissolves an old reflex overnight. But there is a question worth carrying into the next relationship that starts to feel like too much, too fast. Is this actually danger, or is it simply closeness, arriving faster than the old alarm knows how to tolerate? If this reached something in you, say so in the comments. Specifically, if you're willing, at what point in a relationship this pattern tends to activate for you. And if you know someone who has spent years calling this fear of commitment, this might be the first time anyone has offered them a truer name for it.